Donald has made it very clear through his own writings on Truth Social and X, as well as the photograph of him in a crown that the White House posted 3 places, that he really does believe that he is America's dictator, which is what I been warning people for almost 10 years.
Hi, I'm Maddie, Hale, and welcome to the Trump Report. Today we've had David Cay Johnston on the program. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, a professor at Rochester Institute of Technology, and an author on an array of books about Donald Trump. So the perfect person to speak to as the week goes on. So much news when it comes to Donald Trump. We've spoken to him about J.D. Vance's controversial comments today where he alluded to British and French troops and he got himself in hot water. Several veterans have called for him to actually apologise. Donald Trump also froze military aid being sent to Ukraine, so we've spoken to him about that. So much to cover today on the Trump Report, so you can watch us every day, Monday through Friday, on Times Radio's YouTube. David Cay Johnston, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and professor at Rochester Institute of Technology, and an author on an array of books around Donald Trump. Thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
Glad to be with you, Maddie.
And I don't even know where to begin when it comes to the week that we've had. And I'm sure you, as someone who's based in America and teaching this, would feel even more so than me. But I want to dive straight into what's happened today with J.D. Vance, David. Now, in a Fox News interview that was released today, he basically explains why Zelenskyy should be agreeing to this rare minerals deal with the United States, saying that it's more security for Ukraine if the United States has an economic stake in Ukraine as opposed to security that he wants, which is basically signing off that the United States will be there for Ukraine in the event that Putin does invade again. And he made this quote that I'm going to read you out. He said to Sean Hannity, "It's a better security guarantee than 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 to 40 years. Now, he didn't mention the UK or France by name, but do you think it's safe to say that the VP just kind of disrespectfully forgot that British troops had actually fought and died in both the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War?
Yeah, this is indicative of what's going on with the Trump administration, not just Donald alone. They don't know history. They don't have any cultural background. And, imagine since you're in London, if the Truman administration at the end of World War II had said, oh, by the way, we saved you from the Nazis, you owe us this huge pile of money, and you need to give us the rights to Heathrow Airport in perpetuity. Instead, we did the opposite, and particularly with the Germans, we rebuilt the countries that we had vanquished. They're now basically trying to extract tribute from the Ukrainians. And I'm not sure that their plan is well thought through. It turns out that the maps on what minerals are in Ukraine were done by the Soviet-era geologists who were under a lot of pressure to produce what the Kremlin wanted to read as opposed to reliable, factual information.
So do you think, David, that this is all a ploy to kind of adhere to the American constituents that do believe that the United States has been fronting up the bill for Ukraine for far too long? It's time for Europe to be stepping up. It's time for Ukraine to be grateful. Is this all about adhering to the MAGA supporters?
Yes, and it's also all about bowing down to Donald, who I've known and covered for almost 37 years, and who really believes that he is the only person fit to lead the United States. And frankly, if Donald could lead the whole world, he would do that because of his, delusional self-view. So what we've seen, Maddie, in this last couple of days is a complete reordering of the world. The United States of America has always stood for liberty and democracy. Now we are standing with a murderous tyrant, Vladimir Putin, against a democracy. That's one of the reasons European leaders had their emergency meeting over the weekend to see what they can do and whether they have the capacity to quickly get to the front line the munitions and weaponry the Ukrainians need to hold off the Russians, who are themselves in such bad shape that they are literally using donkey carts to deliver bullets and meals to the front.
I think it is important to acknowledge that, David, that yes, the Ukraine is kind of on a knife edge here with their own military. And even though Ukraine is obviously so grateful for everything the US has sent, they were given secondhand stuff. So it's not like they were given the most amazing equipment, all the new and brightest gear from the US. But I just want to get back onto this comment from JD. I guess rewriting history, we could say. Several veterans have said that he needs to apologise for disrespecting the dead and the living. Do you agree that this is something JD should be doing, especially at a time when it's so divisive right now? The tensions are so high between allies, UK, Europe, and the United States.
Well, the chances that J.D. Vance will apologize are zero and none, because one of the principles of Donald Trump is no matter what the facts show, you never apologize. You don't back off from a comma. But he should not be speaking the way he is if he wants to be respected for knowing what he's talking about and treating other world leaders with a modicum of respect. And, you know, the show we saw in the Oval Office, Zelenskyy did say thank you, but he was shouted down and they had no interest in listening to him.
How do you think JD is going in this job as vice president, David? Because he's had a bit of a string of things that have become quite controversial. Now, he's said those comments today about alluding to British and French troops. He was shouting at Zelenskyy in the Oval Office. Some called him a minion and like a follower of Donald Trump's, a guard dog, if you will. And then on top of that, earlier in the start of the administration, he went to the Munich Security Conference and he was incredibly controversial in his speech, really throwing allies under the bus. So all of this together, is he right for the job?
Well, all vice presidents are supposed to be loyal to the president. It was part of the problem that Kamala Harris had in the campaign on issues like Gaza. She hinted that she felt very differently than how Joe Biden had acted, but she can't challenge what he's saying. So we shouldn't be surprised that J.D. Vance hews to the Trump line. On the other hand, yes, he's his attack dog. And the game here is for him to be the next president after Donald. So the building him up as a follower and a follow-on president is a crucial part of Donald's efforts. And understand that Donald has made it very clear through his own writings on Truth Social and X, as well as the photograph of him in a crown that the White House posted 3 places, that he really does believe that he is America's dictator, which is what I been warning people for almost 10 years, that Donald believes he should be dictator and he has unlimited power to do whatever he wants. And he's actually said that in his first term. He said the Constitution gives him the power to do anything he wants.
It is interesting because it's hard for some, I guess, Trump enthusiasts to admit that Donald Trump is a dictator. Some would just say that he's a strong leader. Others would compare him to Putin. What do you think in terms of admission? Do you think that this would be something that he would ever say he was?
Well, I don't know that Donald would ever say he's dictator, but boy, the posting of the picture with him with a crown that says "Long live the King." After all, we defeated the British Army in 1777 would strongly suggest that we should not think of him that way. Donald's a little smarter than to ever say, you know, I am your emperor. But it's his conduct that matters. One of the things I teach journalists all over the world is pay less attention to what politicians say and more attention to what they do.
And I think people are starting to really understand that, especially when it comes to Donald Trump, David. But just for your immediate reaction to last Friday's press conference between Zelenskyy and members of the Trump cabinet, what was your immediate reaction to that spectacle?
Well, I thought it was an ambush, and I think comments made at the beginning and the end make it clear that this was planned to be that way, that they intended to dress down Zelenskyy in the meeting. I think Zelenskyy did not handle himself well. He took the bait on one of the questions, which was a bad mistake from J.D. Vance. You know, he should have simply been resolute. And interestingly, on the right in America, there's been a lot of criticism of Zelenskyy for not wearing a suit, which J.D. Vance brought up in the meeting. But, Elon Musk didn't wear a suit in the Oval Office either, and I haven't heard one word of criticism from right-wing media in America about Elon Musk disrespecting the office because of how he dressed.
I know it was a bit of a stretch there. Donald Trump keeps saying, even to this day, that Zelenskyy doesn't want peace. The Ukrainian president, has just released a statement basically saying all he wants is peace. He's ready to negotiate. He's ready to sit down again with Donald Trump and sign a deal and strengthen the ties again with the United States. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, Zelenskyy clearly wants to have peace. He doesn't want to give up any of the territory of Ukraine, especially since the Russians signed a 1993 treaty promising that if Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons to Russia, they would never invade Ukraine. What's really going on here, I think, is quite clear. Donald Trump has allied himself with Vladimir Putin, and he is trying to do everything he can for Putin to get what Putin wants in this matter. This is, I think, very transparent about what's going on. And the idea that Ukraine can't continue because they don't have American weapons, well, I would just point you to the war in Vietnam, where the impoverished Vietnamese held off for years and years and years until the Americans walked out, leaving 58,000 Americans of my generation dead.
David, today Donald Trump officially froze the military aid being sent to Ukraine. This is a huge development in Ukraine's fight to keep the upper hand with Russia. Do you think that Putin will take advantage of this and try and occupy more of Ukraine and not, keep up this front that he wants peace like he tells Trump?
Well, at the moment, we're about to enter into mud weather in that part of the world. It's not a good time for you to move an army. But I think that Putin absolutely is going to do whatever he can to advance his interests. He's been losing troops at between 1,000 and 1,600 a day. And I don't mean casualties, I mean dead soldiers. In World War II, the United States, fighting in both the Pacific and in Europe, only lost an average of 300 soldiers a day. So the losses here are absolutely horrific on the Russian side. Putin doesn't care. He has no regard for the lives of those who are being conscripted and pulled out of prisons and sent to the front with almost no training. One of the things those who have been captured tell the Ukrainians that they were taught how to handle a gun, and that was pretty much the end of their training. So Putin's not going to back off or walk away unless he absolutely has to. And now the Trump administration has lifted a lot of the sanctions. They're going to be able to sell oil and get access to money. And that will help Putin continue this war of aggression against democracy. It isn't just against Ukraine. It's a war against democracy, which Putin has said is a sick joke.
Keir Starmer, David, spoke to Donald Trump last night. We don't know the ins and the outs of the conversation, but he never mentioned today in the news cycle that Trump had told him that he was about to freeze aid to Ukraine, which is something you would have thought the Prime Minister of the UK would have mentioned as he continues his fight to backing Ukraine. If that did happen and Donald Trump didn't alert his biggest ally, the UK, Keir Starmer, that they were about to freeze military aid to Ukraine, what do you think that says about the state of the relationship between the two countries right now?
Well, Donald Trump doesn't tell people lots of things he's going to do, and he often contradicts himself. The tariffs he's just imposed on Canada and Mexico, where he goes, who made this terrible deal? He did. It was his deal to renegotiate trade when he was president before. So not telling Starmer what he was up to, that's perfectly consistent with Donald's mercurial nature. And he doesn't feel accountable to anyone. Why in the world would he feel accountable to a British prime minister, particularly one who is at all to the left of him?
Exactly right. I mean, it was a cordial meeting between the two. I think that Keir Starmer has been praised over here for the way he kind of played the game with Donald Trump. He actually did such a good job. But David, I know you can't speak for all of Americans, but it was an interesting statement from a member of the Kremlin, a spokesperson from Vladimir Putin, who said that the United States' foreign policy is now largely coincided with Russia's vision. And he used to think that was impossible to imagine, but now it's more of a reality. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree that it's impossible to imagine. When I was in high school 60 years ago, if a teacher had said the day will come when a Republican American president will align himself with whoever is running the Kremlin, I would have gone to the principal's office and said the teacher's crazy. But here we are. And America is very deeply divided about this. Essentially, those people who are what Donald calls the poorly educated are cheering him on. If you go to the kinds of news services they rely on to the extent that they do at all, you will have no idea of what you and I are talking about. You will see a lot of lionizing of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. So there's a lot of lack of information, and then the belief that Donald is either God himself or God's appointed savior. And Donald himself says, I alone can save you. Therefore, who are you to question what Donald Trump does? On the other side, we've seen demonstrations from the East Coast to Alaska to San Diego, California, protesting Trump policies just in the last few days. And a number of Republicans, lawmakers, went to see Democratic members of Congress, whom I met with on Capitol Hill a week ago, to say, what do we do? We're going to get voted out of office. I mean, they were very scared. And the key Democrat I talked to sort of wryly smiled and said, like, they think it's my problem as a Democrat to bail them out?
That's hilarious. But on that note, David, now we were finding at the start of this, I guess, the administration, that a lot of Republicans were openly divisive, openly saying that they didn't want Trump to do certain things, especially sending US troops to Ukraine. Now, Trump hasn't flagged that would happen, but a particular example of the divisiveness and the backflip is Lindsey Graham. Now, he was a very staunch Ukraine all the way. Zelenskyy is an ally. We cannot let them fall. We have to be giving them money. He was always having their back. He has now all of a sudden in the last few weeks completely turned his back. Last week said that Zelenskyy needs to resign or change. It feels like Trump's team just fall into line. Is that your interpretation of the situation?
Oh, exactly. The Republicans are all afraid that if they stand up to Donald Trump, that in a primary election, that's where the party picks its candidate, they will lose because a number of people who stood up to Trump, who were Republicans, were defeated in primaries, even though it takes a very small number of voters, but dedicated MAGA voters, to beat somebody. Lindsey Graham has a long history with Donald Trump of originally saying he's a kook, he's crazy, he's a racist, he has no business being in government, and now bowing down to him at every turn. He has a rubber spine.
A good way to end the interview. David Cay Johnston, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
Thank you, Maddie.